Coming up on this episode of the Cardiff Central podcast, Carwyn and myself were joined by Lynn Glaister, CF10 chair, and David Allen, supporter advisor to the board. We discussed things such as the WRU strategy, how that relates to the Cardiff, developments to CAP, to the improving CAP structure. We also delve into the development pathways and how we think they could be a real asset for the club. We are also talking about communication, about how WRU can improve the communicating between supporters and the pro sides. Hope you enjoy listening.
Welcome to the Cardiff Central podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Cardiff Central podcast. I'm Harley in the hot seat as ever. I'm joined by Carwyn this week. How are you doing, Carwyn?
All good, thanks, Harley. Yourself?
Yeah, all good. No Dan this week. He is on warm weather drinking training in the Canary Islands. So, yeah. But we are joined by the wonderful Lynn and David from CF10 Trust and Supporters Advisor of Cardiff Rugby Board, respectively. How are we both doing?
Well, feeling very nice. No, you're saying wonderful. That's lovely. No, very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good. Happy new season.
Yeah, happy new season indeed. So obviously it's been a while since we both had you on the podcast, Lynn, a fair bit longer than David. But any updates you'd like to share from your respective boards and organisations?
Well, I mean, we're still here, which over the last year or two, we weren't absolutely sure, were we, that we were going to survive the WRU and its lack of strategy, but Cardiff Rugby's here and I think going to get stronger. Still problems, still issues, but sort of quite optimistic. And as a trust, we are still meeting with the chief exec of Cardiff Rugby. So if anybody has got questions, we're always keen to hear from people. And it's probably I will remind people later on in the thing, but we've got an open meeting for CF10 members on October the 8th, which we've sent out an email about already, but we will send out a reminder.
Yeah, cool. We'll share it. We'll reshare that one with the description as well. David, what about yourself? Any news coming out of the Cardiff board?
Yeah, we're kind of grappling with the big issues, as you might expect, WRU strategies and kind of things like that. So, still, engaged in trying to work out exactly what the future structure of Welsh rugby is going to be, I guess. So that's taking up a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good. It would be good if we knew when they were actually going to come up with the strategy and what level of strategy it's going to be, and etc., etc. So we're yeah.
That means we've got nothing on. So, sorry, David, finish.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say they were pretty. I think they're pretty nailed on to making a statement next month. Which is what we heard when we met with them with the joint supporters group. And there's a lot of work going on, kind of at least weekly at the moment, trying to sort of pull that together. So as far as we know, they're still looking to make a more detailed statement in October, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Speaking of the joint supporters group meeting, obviously the last minutes were shared a few weeks ago. We did briefly go over the pod. Are there any points you just want to raise for listeners who maybe might not have had a look at the minutes themselves?
I don't know if David wants to go first, because I was actually I was away in Australia at the time of that meeting, so I didn't actually attend the meeting myself, although I have.
It's the first one I've been to, actually, so it was a new experience for me, but it was useful. I think it was kind of unfortunate in that the day that we met was the day that they actually produced the high level strategy that you saw in June. So quite a lot of the meeting was kind of taken up with them going through that. But I think it was a fairly a fairly honest discussion about the state of the Welsh game, the state of the finances in the Welsh game, and going back to my kind of previous point, we were pushing them really on, I guess, whether they were willing and able to make difficult decisions if it came down to that, this autumn. And would there be kind of further prevarication? And they seem to be fairly clear that, yeah, there were tough decisions to be made, and they would make those decisions if necessary. So a lot of it was about that. A lot of it was about, or there was quite a detailed discussion on things like Judgment Day, which had been, only fairly recently happened then, and we gave a lot of feedback on that, and they were clear on how important they saw it as kind of a component of Welsh rugby kind of going forward. And we tried to get them to, my impression has been that those meetings are a bit kind of reactive. What I mean by that is that it's quite often it's the union feeding things back to the supporters groups, and what we were trying to do was to say to them, well, it might be nice to have a more proactive relationship. So as you're thinking about ideas and you want to test concepts out, basically the JSG could act as a sounding board for you. So we tried to sell that idea to them. But it was mainly because of the timing. It was mostly concerned with the One Wales document, which had come out that very afternoon.
And I think that is the thing. I think the previous JSG was the day that there'd been an announcement of one of the assaults investigations. So there's always, seems to be every time we have one, there's always something big happening around the same time, which takes up a good 50% or more of the time, which means it's sort of less time to take up the other issues. We have chased via Barry of the Chris 16 to try to get to meet them before they put the strategy out, suggesting that they might want to actually get some supporters' reactions to it, but they're being very quiet on that at the moment. They said they would consider it. I suspect if I was a betting person, I wouldn't bet that we get to see them before it. I think they're quite happy for things to get out to sort of journalists and the like before, but I think they probably trust the journalists more than they trust a band of supporter group chairs, which may or may not be right.
So this wasn't on the list of questions, but as we brought up the new strategy, what were you hoping for with this new strategy? So I know when it came out, a lot of the issues was it was a lot of word salad and very, very vague. So whichever order you'd like to say, what were you hoping this strategy is going to pinpoint to?
And I think key things from a supporters trust point of view, I think something definite, something that a financial strategy can actually be pinned on, something that was longer term, something that you could actually build, because every time we ask what the strategy for something is at Cardiff, they're always waiting for the next strategy from the WRU or the next funding announcement or the next. And so I think the idea that there'll be something that is definite and slightly more long term, something that actually recognises that we're in the days of pro rugby, other than the not just the Welsh team and then a load of other clubs, that they have to actually recognise and support pro clubs as we look to help develop players, and not just have that happen through academies, just the academies. That we are part of that. We are part of that, but we're also an entity in our own right. So something that actually recognises that and is more of a collaborative, rather than always top down. Sort of like one that actually takes into account the needs of our club and recognises our want to have some level of independence as well. So that's a couple of things from me. I'd also like to see a strategy. I don't think it will come into this, but I'd love to see a women's rugby team based at the Arms Park as well. But I don't think we'll see that as part of this strategy.
David, anything from the sort of the Cardiff board level? Any hopes on there?
It's tricky because obviously it's like really confidential at the moment, and I'm not at liberty to sort of share much detail. Although there are some of the major points I think are in the public domain. They have been reported by various people. I suppose not from a board point of view, but from a personal point of view, I think we're in an interesting time because we had the very high level statements you've all seen in June, and then I think end of July we had a kind of financial strategy that went along with that initial paper that is public. And the latter sort of has a lot of good points attached to it, but it lacks a lot of detail as well in some key areas. So it was hard to know whether some of the things that were being suggested were kind of good, bad, or indifferent really. So it's a bit strange in a way because what we've got is the 5 principles that the Welsh strategy sort of lays down, and we've got the financial plan or a financial plan, but we're kind of lacking the bit in the middle in a sense. So we've got the what, and we haven't really got the how. So I think a lot of the work that's going on at the moment, and it is pretty intense. It's about trying to tease out those details and tease out the kind of how really. So there are at least weekly meetings taking place at the moment with PRB. So it's a massive time-consuming exercise. Personally, in terms of what I want to see out of the strategy, I think it's good in the sense that club rugby is properly mentioned now. So even though that document which came out in June has been criticised as being very, very high level, perhaps too high level, at least it does mention club rugby, which is a new development. We haven't had that before with all the focus being on Team Wales. But I suppose what I'd like to see come out of it is there being at least one, possibly 2 Welsh sides that will not just be competitive, but which will be successful in whatever competitions we're playing in. And I guess the worry is that we might just end up touching competitive, in that we might not actually sort of see the strategy really being true in terms of its desire for Welsh clubs to be successful in the competitions in which they play. I'm slightly anxious that we'll end up continuing to be eating crumbs off the table really. So for me, I'd like to see something quite radical, and which ensures that we have at least 1 or possibly 2 successful teams competing in the URC or whatever it is. But Lynn's mentioned a key point about kind of long term. I think this is not a quick fix. It's going to require years to try and get this thing right. So I think it is looking more long term certainly than anything we've had in recent years. So that's good in itself. But yeah, I think it's where I'm not privy to what's happening in these discussions. So they probably moved on quite a bit from the documentation that I've seen. But yeah, so that's my personal aspirations, really, my personal view. That's my personal thoughts about it rather than a board view on it.
Rowan, did you want to?
Yeah, I feel like that point on the high level, I think it was described as a Christmas wish list when it came out in June by a certain journalist, not myself, I want to reiterate, but it was it's something that it would be good to see, that clarity of what is the how. I think the how was the message that was constantly being asked and displayed, and on that point about being competitive size, I think one of the pillars is, and you see the eye goals, and just looked at it now as David was talking, was consistently competitive clubs that challenge in the playoffs of their competitions. Now, that says to me that you want multiple clubs each season being in that top eight, and going far in, well, at least going for the knockout stages of Europe. So I think that's a must, to be frank. But at the moment, with the budgets and all the talk about the gap, what is it, 2 million gap going into next season between us and the Irish clubs and the English clubs across the border, that's it's going to be difficult to remain competitive with that. I think the clubs have done very well, and regions have done really well to keep hold of a number of brilliant players, but we've seen a number of brilliant players leave. I think that's just the situation we are in currently, really, isn't it? That until we have that clarity of the how for the clubs, I've spoken to various press officers, and they don't know if they're going to be continuing the next couple of years. That's the realization of where that we are, is until they get that clarity, and that message that Warren Gatland keeps talking about, clarity. Until the regions have that clarity, the players don't have that clarity, the supporters don't have that clarity. So yes, this I think the detail of this strategy needs to come out, obviously done correctly, but sooner rather than later. I'd hate to see this going into next year and then pushing into next summer. That's way too long then. It needs to be coming pre-Christmas, correct, but pre-Christmas.
I think we've had several rounds of recruitment where we've not known what our budget is when the key recruitment times are happening, and that's it is amazing the number of people they've managed to keep, and the work that they've done, really, given the fact that we haven't really been able to go into those recruitment phases with any clarity of whether we actually had the budget to recruit anybody.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it and the point about we can't map out our strategy until we know what the wider parameters are within which we're operating is true. I don't think I've been kind of Billy No Mates, really, in the board, because I've been sort of saying, well, actually, there are things we can do, and I think actually last time out we began to articulate what we want to see in our own strategy and what our own plan is kind of going forward. And we can't, it's true, we can't finalise that until we have the detail from the WRU. But I think at least internally we've begun to try and get some clarity on our own big objectives, if you like, for the next kind of couple of years. So we are in the waiting room. We're always in the waiting room, but I think there's something about trying to take charge of your own destiny as well, as much as you can. So we're sort of beginning that process, I think.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Trying to be proactive, but when you've got that underlying uncertainty, it's difficult to get that. Just the morale of various individuals is difficult, I think, at the time as well. So it's as you say, it's a bit of a weird time.
There are things that we can do. Quite right. I mean, I was at Summerfest. We were doing the trophy room tours, but outside you had Mackenzie Martin just surrounded. It was like bees to a honeypot, and he's a local boy, come from the local systems, and we're starting to realize the value of people like that, and you can build a momentum around him rather than always having to have a lot of the big signings. We need some of that, but to see that was quite it's quite heartening, really. Your local boys can be the local heroes and can build the sort of the impression of a side going somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously part of this this particular pod is to sort of bring forward some questions from supporters. Just so one which sort of come through some of my friends who I know who are big followers of the women's game. They were wondering if you could take some feedback to WU of just the sheer lack of communication, is particularly when you compare what they promoted for the men's game compared to the women's game. Like the first mention they had of the warm-up game against Scotland was the team announcement, and a lot of people were quite annoyed at that, and you didn't get the same level of game updates, even though we appreciate it's an away fixture, but considering that they were able to give us score by score updates of a game in Australia, and then not one of our closest rivals, really, when you exclude the Red Roses. It's quite frustrating.
I absolutely, utterly agree, and it isn't. I mean, that's a particularly stark thing, and it's one of their teams, so it's a WRU team that they're not communicating about. One of the things we've raised every time that I've been there is the lack of any communication from the WRU about about our clubs generally, and anybody outside that WRU men's team, because they've got a powerful database that they've built up with all the people buying tickets for at the Principality Stadium. They've got they do have the ability with the national and local media to advertise. So I mean, I myself and others do generally bring up the women's game every time we meet with Gesture, but it's more about, to be honest, it's more been about the lack of any real link with the clubs, which means that you lose out on that support that you might get from the Cardiff season members and the like, and sort of try to link it. And Nigel Walker's generally been in charge of the women's game, and he's always sort of full of how much there's been done. But that communication point, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's crazy. So yes, definitely will bring that up.
Yes, thank you. So before we move on to some of the other questions, just wanted to put a shameless plug for all of our other podcasts and things. So if you are enjoying what you're listening to, or want to hear our interviews with Matt Sherratt or Gruff Rees, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and share all the podcasts and socials, and any reviews are always welcome. Now I've got that shameless self-grandiosing plug out of the way. David, one of the last when you were on last time, you were talking about redevelopments of the Pack Bar. So we've had a message from a big fan of the pod, Tony. He's just wondering what updates. So he's noticed that there's, he said he appreciates that there's working TVs there, but it's not necessarily been, the renovations haven't necessarily gone as fast as he would like. So he's just wondering if there are any updates on that.
Yeah, I think it looks a lot better personally. It looks a lot more like a rugby club. Having the frame shirts from our opposing teams in the Pro 14, I think, as it was then. So it looks, I think, a lot more like a rugby club, and it's certainly been, it's been refurbished, so the floor's been replaced and things like that. Things that we haven't done include, we were going to have a timeline of the club's history going around the wall in that sort of front part of the area, which is where the supporters club normally are, and we haven't done that. I was actually talking to Dickie about this yesterday, and we were. There's a number of reasons for it. I mean, first we're developing a new gym, as you know, on site, which is kind of making use of rooms that we're kind of renting from the WRU. So that's kind of taken up some of the capital that we were thinking about perhaps spending there. But the other problem is just there's no space. There's no space at the Arms Park. So actually, the Pack Bar is being used again now for some of the BTEC training. So that area, which I think probably Tony's referring to, the clinical bit. I saw his comment, saw his question. Is kind of it's having that kind of double function at the moment. So that's another reason. So It's not to say we won't do any more stuff with it. It's just that at the moment we're spending the cash, I think, on more priority areas. But we'll continue to enhance it probably. I personally think it looks a lot better than it did last year, not just because the TVs are working.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
something I feel quite strongly about, really, because and sort of with lobbying for work to be done, because I'm a member of the Cardiff Athletic Club, so I can go in the club bar. But most of the people I go to the rugby with aren't. So in reality, we tend to go drinking at the City Arms or somewhere like that, right? Because nobody else can come in the club bar on Cardiff rugby nights. It's fine on the RFC games, and the Pat bar was pretty awful. I think it's better than it was, but it's still not a place. It's still not quite there, is it? And I think the Bath fans on Friday night, my friend one of the friends I go to the rugby with, and she stands in the terraces, and she was in the queue for the drinks and things out in the back under the stand, and she said she felt quite ashamed about our facilities, and there wasn't really anywhere really nice for away fans to go. But it is more than just away fans. It's non Cardiff Athletic Club season members as well. So I think we'll still carry on trying to get those improvements, even though I know money is scarce, but I think it's going to be worse.
It's not just the money, though. It's the basic kind of structure that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And that places great limitations on. So I think everyone knows those problems.
Yeah.
But there's a huge issue as long as we're stuck in a 50-year-old stadium. We've got those problems, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did pop into the Jack Matthews bar after the game on Friday, and it's quite nice seeing some of the it's only looks like it's been some light touch redecorating it, but the player caricatures and the nod to Rayleigh Lowe's Samoan heritage I thought was actually really nice.
Yeah.
This thing, I can't remember the name of what it is, but yeah, it's just a really nice thing. It's nice seeing that it is improving, and I got my cup of tea from under the southwest terrace, so that I was thank you for that, because that is something I've been desperate for, being so many problems back on a Friday. Going on, obviously, we know that we can't have any real redevelopment until after the Euros, but I know planning is still in place. So on the questions Dan sent for us to ask you, Lynn. So what role do you reckon CF10 can take in sort of facilitating the discussions between the athletic club and the Cardiff Rugby Board in terms of the redevelopment and the new lease?
What role can anybody take in facilitating the conversations between Cardiff Athletic Club and Cardiff Rugby? We're quite happy to take part in any conversations, but I suspect that that's actually not something that we can easily do. I mean, we are members. Most of us are board members and members of the Cardiff Athletic Club, so we go to those meetings. But it's I'd love to say yes, we'll go in and we'll have peace in our time, or we'll have sort of genuine we'd always be prepared to do what we can, but I think this one is probably, in terms of the redevelopment, I think our input would probably be more about what facilities and what things that we would like to see in it, once the sort of overall agreement's happening, the sort of what we would like to see, the sort of the facilities for supporters, away supporters. So I think whatever suggestions people have got, we'll keep feeding them into Cardiff Rugby, either via the meetings we have with Dickie or via David as part of it as he goes to his normal meeting. Sorry, that's not doesn't feel like the most positive thing to say, but I think that's the reality of it, that we probably
it's probably accurate, though.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very wise statement. I think that's right, actually, because we CF10 got us a few years ago now. We did a survey then, sort of saying to people, what would you like to see? in a new ground. And that was probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So when the time's right, it's not. I don't think it's right at the moment. It would perhaps be good to repeat that. But like in a sense, like nothing's changed. There have always been talks about the redevelopment for as long as I can remember. And I think there are certainly suggestions on the table at the moment, but you're absolutely right. Harley, nothing will happen. We all know that until post the Euros 2028. But hopefully, we want to be in a position whereby, once that competition's out of the way, then stuff starts happening, so we can anticipate, hopefully, more conclusive discussions before that. But I think it like every board meeting we spend a lot of time looking at issues to do with the ground and what priorities to spend money, usually around kind of safety and things like that. So it's not sustainable, and everybody knows that. And CAC is well aware of the pivotal nature of having first class rugby at the ground to make any future stadium kind of make sense, really. So I think it's always hugely frustrating, and I've said it many times before, but with the Elms Park, like, everybody always seems to want the same thing, but getting them to agree that thing all on a particular day at a particular time is sometimes quite difficult and quite frustrating. But we have to be optimistic, and I think we have to find a solution, because basically, all the things that Lynn was mentioning, plus all the things that you don't know about, about the boring stuff around the infrastructure, it can't carry on. So there has to be a solution, and we're optimistic that we'll get one in the time frame that we're talking about.
Carwyn, anything you'd write about the facilities at CAP? Fan engagement?
See, so I'm a really awkward one on this, because I really like and I do feel terrible about this, but I think it's partly because I come at it from a slightly different angle, where I'm either in the journalist box or I'm there as a fan in the North Stand, and I'm just there standing and watching the game. I don't particularly, I don't know. I've never really got blown away by facilities anyway. I haven't been to the one probably exception could be Racing 92 Stadium, but unless we're thinking about bringing the Globetrotter money there. But there are structural improvements that can be had. There are various things, but I think you look at elements of the history that are being brought back and the emphasis on the history. I think they're really strong improvements. I think that's not improvements, but maybe developments, and maybe things that we're seeing more and more of. And I think that to continue, and the emphasis on the culture, reiterating the things we've seen from what Lynn was saying about Mackenzie Martin and his culture and him being this new beacon of positivity alongside Alex Mann, alongside these Cardiff boys that are coming through, and then hopefully we can have to say the same about Cardiff girls coming through in the women's sides as well in the future. That would be something that I'd be really keen to see more and more of. I quite like the idea of a timeline going around. I appreciate the logistical issues of it, but you go to Queen's Vaults, for instance, and you've got images of the 2005 team going around the sides. That's something that really entices me about that, and I think it would be a really nice addition. You could have photos of the European success sides, photos of the EDF success sides, things like that. I think would be really good for fan engagement, really good for fan information, almost, actually being informative rather than just being a photo on a wall somewhere where fans maybe don't go to, fans maybe don't see. To see these images, you can see it in the tunnel as you're going through, and you can see, compare your size to Jonah Lomu and things like that. But images about the history of the club and things like that, I think would be really positive, because it could, anything that highlights the history and the lineage of a region can really enlighten the region and make people want to be a supporter and want to look at more information and find out maybe 50 years back. But let's look at the last 20 years and find the highlights and outline those, I would say.
I mean, I would say just to say I love Cardiff Arms Park as well. I just want it to have better disabled facilities. I want it to have better facilities for, for the sponsors, so we can bring in more sponsors to get more money. I want it better facilities for away supporters. I want that stuff, but I don't want to lose the essence of Cardiff Arms Park as a proper rugby ground. I controversially didn't like the Racing 92 ground when I went to it in February. I really didn't. I ended up with a headache at the end of it, with all the sort of flashing lights and the disco, and the fact that they turned it into a disco at the end was just bizarre, wasn't it? But no, I wasn't as fond of it as a lot of people were. The seats were comfy, but I do like. I like a lot about the Cardiff Arms Park, but it's old. There are parts of it that are too old and need some love and a bit of extra facilities, really.
It's interesting. I look at it, like I looked at it on Friday, and I thought, well, actually, I always look at it and I think, well, it actually looks quite nice, the boxes.
Yeah.
But it is what's behind that. That's the problem, really. It is the kind of infrastructure. But I think it's taken an age, but we've kind of finally managed to get in place a new management structure for the museum, which will kind of come into operation this month. Taken 2 years to get that through. But one of the things we've spoken about previously, so all the heritage work really has been on hold for about 18 months, to be honest. But one of the things we've spoken about in the past is possibly putting QR codes at strategic places around the ground that people can then scan and get information about famous moments in the club's history and things like that. Because one of our aspirations about 18 months ago was, in a sense, to get history out of the trophy room and get it out of the athletic club in a positive way. So in other words, that wasn't where it was located, but the whole ground, in essence, was a tribute to history. So obviously there won't be huge money spent on really innovative stuff if we're going to redevelop in a couple of years. But I think things like that will be fairly cheap to do. So I think that's probably something we'll look to dust off and think about whether we can do stuff like that, because that would fit into what you've described, Carwyn, I think, rather well.
Yeah, it's that immersive element, isn't it? Rather than just having it in one place, having it just all around you. I have thought of one other improvement I'd love to see is the north stand screen working permanently, because occasionally it does go on the blink, and rather than have 20 journalists craning their heads to see the south stand one, it'd be nice to see the north stand one working. I realise that's probably a weather thing.
Have they improved the north stand speakers since I used to sit there about 15 years ago? You could never hear what they were saying over the speakers either at that time. I should say that the trophy room tours we did at Summerfest, it's great to do them, but there's something a bit sad about people coming to the door of the trophy room, which are wide open on those days, and hardly daring to put their foot over the step to get into the room, because it's sort of like the secret room that for many days is closed or used as the committee room on RFC days and things like that. So to have that sort of immersive stuff and have it available to everybody, and watching it's the young kids, but it was also like the young kids who've been brought by their grandfather or their grandmother, and the sort of, and there was the young lads who were like the kids of players and things were coming in, and it was just like an awe, and that's great that they value it, but it's sad that people feel a fear of walking over that doorstep.
About taking it from being the club's history to everyone's history, and it's that transition. Yeah, that's important.
I mean, David's very much more involved in the history thing than I am. It's but I think that whole thing about reclaiming that history and reclaiming the fact that we're there since 1876 and the whole club. It's just about the club, the atmosphere of the club, the history of the club, the feeling of it. We're more than just that time at that match. It's about the whole history and future of the club is all bound together. And I think it was so important to do that. So sometimes we can be accused of being too interested in CF10 is about the heritage. Well, we are, but it's about the heritage and how it's used and how it. I mean, Matt Sharrett uses it now as ways of sort of showing people the pride that you can give into that jersey. And so I think it's been important, and I think it'll continue to be important.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. So, just sort of going to slowly. I just really appreciate the time you're giving. We're going to slowly transition more towards sort of the on-field now, because we did have a question on Twitter from Spiky Starling about allocation for away tickets for the Challenge Cup, and are there going to be any priority for season ticket holders? I don't think that's necessarily anything either of you two would know, but
No, I
think
don't
that
know
usually
whether,
is the case.
I don't know.
No, again,
we don't normally
fortunately,
do it.
I saw the question because Lynn sent it on to me. But the answer is no, I'm afraid. There won't be. There will be a trip to Perpignan that Tom Shanklin's company is doing. And I don't think that's been advertised yet, but it will be advertised hopefully sort of fairly shortly. And yeah, that's like a 2-day, 2-night stay or something, £500. Where we did something similar, I think, kind of last year or the year before. So no, we won't have tickets, but we are. There will be that kind of opportunity for supporters to go on an organised trip in January, isn't it? I think. So.
I should say, if anybody gets the chance to go to Perpignan, do, because I went, I don't know, about 15 years ago or so when we played them in the European Cup, and I think there's an 18,000 capacity at the ground, and there was 17,500 Perpignan fans and about 500 of us. But it was just the most fantastic weekend, and for people that like a mix of rugby and culture, it's just, there's just fabulous history in that place as well as the rugby. So I don't know whether I'll be able to go on this particular one. It'll depend on some stuff, but I they're really worth going on. And one of the things that I was talking to Richard about at one of the meetings, which I need to follow up, is that things have changed really, and a lot of people want to do their own travel. So there will be some people that take up that stuff, but supporters more and more find their own way to places. And I know that I would like, somewhere on the club website, would like to be able to go to a link which has got a link to the sides that we play, that says sort of ideas for how you get there. I mean, I know how to get to, I know how to get to Dublin, I know how to get to Belfast, but not really sure about the Connaught stuff and things like that. But if you've actually got an info about the type of things that there are in, the links to the hotel type websites for those areas and things like that, just sort of, so for independent travelers, but perhaps it just needs a little bit of help in terms of where's the best places or where's the good places to start. And also the supporters club, the Cardiff Blue and Black supporters club, are, clearly do travel when they can, do travel stuff when they can, and then they've got a bus on for the Scarlets, but they really need people's support. So if people are wondering about how to get to things and they see one of these supporters clubs buses, it'd be great if people do think about traveling with them, because it costs a lot of money. It costs over £1,000, I think, to put on a bus nowadays, and they don't have any funds from anywhere else other than where the supporters traveling, so the less people that use them, and I do understand that people don't necessarily want to do that. I'm a bit more of an independent traveler, but if you're thinking about how to get to these places, it is worth giving them a go as well.
Yep, sounds good. I mean, I've just come up with, it's given me a great idea for a business, sort of like a rugby local guides, a rugby version of local guides. You get like local rugby fans to show them, but that I think that would be something for someone else to implement. I'd never do it. As I said, as we sort of slowly transition to on field, we've played our two. Like I said, both the senior section and the Rags have played their pre-season games. How do you think pre-season's gone for both sides?
I've been to both both the home ones. I didn't go to away, but I mean, the RFC was a great day, and playing Cambridge, and really quite impressed. I found myself spending most of the time watching Josh Turnbull and how he was. He spent his whole time going onto the pitch, telling people what to do, and sort of being carrying on being the captain, but from that. So that was quite interesting. I thought the Cambridge rugby team that we played were a sort of serious team, and it felt like we did pretty well. I mean, I think we were playing friendly rules, weren't we? So I think Cambridge could have kicked over in the last minute and could have probably won the game, but we won, so that's the record books. But I thought they were good. And then Bath, well, that was just great to be back. I mean, and what was really nice was where I sit. Everybody that I've sat by for years, whose name I don't really know, but I've sat by them, so we talk all the time. They were all back, and they were all sort of excited and saying, is the hope of last season actually going to sort of move on, really? And I mean, there was a lot of talk on Twitter, from what I could see, that we were playing the second or third team of Bath, and whatever. But that the old adage, you can only play what turns up. And there was stuff in the first half that was maybe needed a bit of extra coaching. But I thought when Callum Sheedy came on, there was just a feeling of, it was almost like a relaxation. Oh yeah, he knows what he's doing, sort of just really felt good having him on. And everybody I've talked to loved Mulder.
Yeah, there's really something about him. Although I thought Alec Davis as well played quite well in the first half. It was quite nice seeing him sort of take some of the game by the scruff of his neck.
Yeah.
David, any thoughts on the pre-season?
Yeah, I haven't seen the Rags actually, but I think it's going to be an interesting season. Nobody really knows what to expect with Super Rugby Cymru. But I think the focus of the Rags is changing. I think there's been a long-standing debate really about what's Rags about. Is it about winning or is it about player development? And it's always been a balancing act. That I think going forward it will be more about player development. So I think it will be a younger team, as we know, and it'll probably find it quite tough initially, perhaps. But I think it's the right direction of travel. Yeah, I mean, Bath was, it was kind of like, it was all our worst nightmares again, wasn't it, first half, all line-outs going amiss, and Big Mac sort of fluffing that tape from the kick-off, and that you thought, oh my goodness. But we really turned it around second half, I thought. And pre-season matches are always strange, aren't they? If you lose, you just go, oh, it doesn't matter. If you win, particularly against something like Bath, you go, oh, that was really important and really significant. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was useful. I agree with you about Alec Davis, looked really good. I thought when Sheedy came on, he looked like one of those players who has time to do things, and I thought that was kind of very noticeable, So overall, I think despite the kind of coughs and splutters in the first half, I thought it was very enjoyable. and the way we came back into that, I thought was really quite impressive. So you just got obviously Jockey's been talking about like continuing to do what we did successfully last year. It's a different squad. It's probably about the same relative strength as last year, despite the kind of comings and goings. So we know we're engaged in a long-term piece of work here. It's not about instant solutions. The aim is to build a team based mostly on homegrown talent as far as we can, and that's going to take a little while to do. But you kind of, I felt it was second half. I felt it was kind of congruent with what we were doing last year, really. Except that I think kind of going forward now, when we talk about recruiting players to play the Cardiff way, I mean, what that means is they've got to be able to contribute to our driving more. Otherwise, they're not in, really.
I think the thing that's worth remembering as supporters as well is that we are the only one of the professional clubs where we've got the RFC is included in our season membership, and we're the only one, and I think that's a definite advantage for supporters. So I think if people can get down and to see the RFC now and again, I think they'll be pleasantly surprised. It's a very nice atmosphere. We'd be genuinely seeing the stars of the future, or the hopeful stars of the future playing, and so I think it's going to be, that part of it could be good.
Yeah. Also, as well as I believe all the age grade stuff is as well, so you can get to see the stars of the day after tomorrow as well, which I think quite exciting. And now I'm working up in Cardiff, I think I'll be making a bit more of that on Thursday and Friday nights. So looking forward to ahead of the season. Are you excited? Seem to have had fairly good recruitment. A lot of support. Some of all the other regions have said, quite a thing. I know on Rap I've been getting a bit of jip about how Cardiff should be topping the league now with all the signs. I mean, I don't think that's I think that's just them teasing, but it's some reason to be excited.
I sort of always, I like to think I'm positive. At the start of every season, you think, this is going to be the season where and it may not be, but there's still the same enjoyment about going to the games. And if they carry on with some development and carry on with the positivity and carry on looking like they're trying out on that pitch, then the supporters will go with them, won't they? And that's so I have no idea what we'll or won't win by the end of the thing, but I'd like to think that we'd win more games than last season, and that we carry on having reasons to turn up, and maybe that because so many of the games are televised nowadays, but then hopefully more supporters will see the exciting brand of rugby we can play, and sort of start turning up in the terraces and the stands, and because it was we had some good gates at times last season, and it would be good to think we can do that again, because there is very definitely a better atmosphere when there's more people in the stands, and when the boys are trying, look like they're trying, which they have done for the last year now. So
yeah, absolutely. And especially with considering the Ticketmaster shut down and the weather, and we still managed to get 6,200 in for a pre-season friendly. I thought that was pretty. Whether it was actually that many, although looking eyeballing the crowd on Friday when someone was asking me how many were there, I said about that. So I'm quite happy with my estimation there. David, anything you'd like to add?
We always kind of count season ticket holders, whether they're there or not. That's what every club does, I think. So it's probably always slightly less than that. Yeah, I think. I think we are on a long-term journey. So we need to continue that journey really, and continue all the things that Matt put in place kind of last year. The squad's roughly the same, not in terms of personnel, but probably in terms of where it's at in terms of kind of winning stuff. But obviously the structure beneath it is different, considerably different in terms of the coaching side and that. Now I think that's a lot kind of stronger. So those underpinnings are what we're really sort of trying to develop, really. I think from a board point of view, our hope is, we turn some of those, 1 score losses into wins this year, but we're not kind of expecting, massive success as compared to last year, because that would be unrealistic. And I think so. There's something about managing expectations for all of us, at this stage. But I think as long as we continue to play that brand of rugby, and we're a team that people want to see, and the culture continues to build. That's what's important for this season, as much as what happens in terms of the results on the pitch, really. And I think in terms of the guys that have kind of come in, I think there's been some pretty good recruitment there, really. And the feedback from Matt is that those newcomers are already contributing significantly. In terms of the experience they bring with them, the practices they bring with them from other teams, and so on. So it's all really reinforcing that direction of travel, which is exactly what he planned, really. So I think the improvements this year will probably continue to be perhaps quite subtle and soft ones, and may not be that kind of obvious to the man or woman on the terrace. But I think if we can have a bit more luck, because we had some really bad luck last year, I thought, in some of those 1 score defeats. So we just need a little bit more luck, really, and that on its own would I think mean that we end up with a better outcome this year. But as Lynn says, we're all optimistic at this time of year, aren't we? I think early season is quite important. We always get our fixtures kind of front loaded, don't we? So it's important. Our home fixtures front loaded, so it's important we have a good start there, I think. But I think we're kind of getting there, but it is a long-term journey.
And we can't underestimate how bad it was last season, really. You have to see that story that was written about Liam Belcher, about his about his contract, and that all that stuff around the players, and it couldn't have been much worse. And I mean, Geffen Jenkins was only working part-time as a coach, and he's now full-time. So there are things that are better than last year, which hopefully will add together to show those improvements.
I just something on what David said there. I almost think maybe not quite, but bar one position, I think when we went through the squad, I was quite said we could do with a bit more strength and depth there. I think we've got good strength and depth. I think scrum halves is probably the most obvious one. Yes, you lose a star player in Thomas Williams, and I'm not understating that at all. But you bring in Aled, you bring in Mulder, and you've got Bevan, who's gone from strength to strength. I think that's a stronger 3 than if you'd have named the 3 that were starting the season last 3, as in terms of strength and depth and that pecking order. And I think you've had another season of Evan Lloyd developing there, so the hooker position strengthened. You've lost Reece Carey, but Ed Burns come in, Southworth to come in. I think the strength and depth there is good. I think what will be interesting, I think Matt Sherritt alluded to it after the game on the weekend, was that what's going to happen if a couple of these players go off with Wales? Who's going to step in? 12 jersey, who's stepping in for Ben if Ben goes? I think it's pretty much there's going to be Rory Jennings now. That's what it's been outlined, that it's that or maybe even Beetham, that continuation of a playmaking 12. But it's almost a negative from all the success they've had, that all these players are now likely to be called up for Wales jersey. So who are the next lads stepping in for them afterwards? If Beetham and Winnett get called up at 15, who steps into the 15 jersey? All those questions will be mapped out this season. But I'm quite positive. I'm positive about Cardiff, and I appreciate what David was saying about developing, and it's likely to be a more developing season. You see the star player like Morgan Allen leaving and things like that. But I think I think the SRC is going to be a great season this year. I'm really excited to see how it goes, even though I know a lot of people have been belittling it and saying it's just another Welsh Premiership. Yes, but I do think there's a real directive now there. There's a plan of action there now in terms of developing young players and developing those players between 23 and 27, as opposed to what was there previously, which was perhaps a free-for-all and just certain clubs, naming no names, just spend money here, there and everywhere, whereas salary cap and a bit more of a general spread around the clubs should be a good positive thing. Outside of Cardiff, looking at Bridgend have really invested heavily in players. They're now likely to get players, so they should improve. I think it should improve the general quality of the league. So I'm excited for the starters. They genuinely am. I haven't been excited for the Welsh Premiership in that way in a long time, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think that's right. I think I was a bit. I think last time I was on, I was saying, well, I wasn't sure about it because, it seemed a bit daft sort of changing this one thing before we actually had the bigger WIU strategy kind of planned out. I still feel a little bit like that, but I do feel much more optimistic about it. I think it is a kind of good move, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if we can get our best 15 out on the pitch, I think we'll give anybody a game. We've got a quality side there, but chances of that happening very often are not kind of great. But if you think about it in terms of the conveyor belt, you're absolutely right. We could lose a sort of shed load of players to Team Wales because of what we achieved last year and hopefully what we'll achieve this. But actually, our focus is on bringing then the next set of guys through. So actually, that's the way the conveyor belt should actually work. We're developing players for Cardiff who develop, as players for Wales. It's a bit thin at the moment, but it is basically that's the formula we should be working to, and we are working to.
I sit next to a woman whose young lad plays for Cardiff schools, and she was saying that they've increased the number of teams even at that level now. So whereas it would all been Cardiff schools play Rhondda schools, they've got Cardiff schools, they've got Cardiff Central, and they've got sort of different number because they've got so many people now. And she was saying that side's definitely improved. So I mean, if they're getting that right as well, and then that's going up into the academies and up into, we've got the one thing we've got is the power of the capital city and the valley straight up from us as well. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people in Wales, and we should have a powerful academy system, and we need to start making it work, or need to start making it work for us as a club, really, because it has worked for a while. Because I mean, you look at the number of people who've come through the Cardiff system. I mean, Callum Sheedy, he's back, isn't he? He was part of the Cardiff system. So let's use the power of the capital city.
I think it has worked. Clearly, if you look at the players who've come through, it has worked, and I think it can work better. So I think like one of Matt's views, it's in terms of our catchment area, it's one of the greatest in Britain.
Yeah.
We just need to join all the bits together to make sure that it works to its absolute kind of maximum. And I think that's really refreshing, because historically it's all been fairly disjointed, etc. But I think there's a real focus now on making that deliver for club and deliver for country. So that's where the long-term bit of it kind of comes in a bit. I think it's not a quick fix, but actually it promises to build a future which is much more stable. So that is the aspiration, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with likes of Kavik being invited to do an international schools competition down in South Africa, I think it was a bit of a wake up call for them. Basically, going up against some of the team, some of the best of the South African schoolboys rugby, where they take, for them, I think it's fair to say that for South Africans, school rugby is their version of college football, which is almost as it is that step below the Currie Cup. But I mean, whenever people talk about Wales copying the Irish system, obviously it will never work entirely, financial and economic systems. But us copying Leinster and using our school system. All right, yes, we haven't got the fancy private schools, but we do have a lot of very good schools, and the likes of Di taking over as head of Rugby Havoc. Richie Reese has gone for Monmouth. So I know Monmouth is more of the Gwent area, but still, we've got all this talent sort of trickling down. Actually, why not make the most of all this sort of thing?
I think I'm not sure if you said it in your podcast actually, or it was at the last board meeting. I think it was the last board meeting, but I think Matt was sort of saying really. It's kind of almost like second to Leinster in terms of its potential, the area that we're kind of working to. So, that's very much a focus going forward, is to make sure that, that machinery, that conveyor belt works as well as it can. And I think historically that hasn't been the case.
A few years ago, we actually did a submission to the Cardiff Council as part of their economic development strategy about the importance of Cardiff Rugby as to the economic development strategy of Cardiff. So it's important for Cardiff Rugby that we are part of the capital city, but it's important for the capital city that we've got Cardiff Rugby as well. So I think we've got an advantage that many haven't.
Carwyn?
Yeah, I completely agree. Just a quick word on Richie Reese, just specifically because I interviewed him recently, and that isn't a plug. Strictly isn't a plug, but I would say it could be quite exciting what he's doing there at Monmouth and what they're trying to grow there. I'm hoping, he's talking about it, trying to compete with the likes of the schools across the border, the likes of Clifton. Because the investment that's gone in there, the new Eddie Butler Centre, things like that. That it's going to be a very positive environment going forward, and hopefully long way it continue, because I think that's an area which Wales have neglect is probably the wrong word, but not utilised to the best extent is those private school systems. And it's almost been, people turn their nose up at the opportunities available there, but they could be really positive going forward in the long term. Alongside Glantaff, I had to get it in.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to see, the Hartburys and the likes, and the fact that they've taken people and converted them into England players. I mean, that's with the women as well. So to know how important it is to have places like Monmouth. We do need, we need the Monmouths and the like, but we also need your Glantaffs and your Whitchurches and.
No, just Glantaff, which is rubbish.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the general view, this is a Welsh Rugby Union view, really, is that we clearly can't. It's obvious we can't replicate the educational opportunities that people are getting elsewhere. But things like Monmouth are really interesting. So it'll be fascinating to see how that kind of shapes up. But I mean, I think from a Cardiff perspective, in particular, the aim is to try and make sure that we're the irresistible place to come back to once people have been through that sort of system. So it's fine to go away, broaden your horizons, get your education and all the rest of it. And there's no way we'll be able to sort of certainly magic up places in Wales that will compete with that. But it's important to be the place that people want to come back to. That's what we're aiming for, is to be in that position, really.
Yeah, I mean, Cardiff universities and the like have got a very high stop-on rate from people who come here from elsewhere, but we need the Cardiff comeback rate to increase as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but I don't know how many of the other sides in the I mean, not in Wales, but certainly how many sides in sort of our league have 3 universities on our doorstep, 2 of which are renowned for sport. So the more we can make use of these things, the better. Carwyn, anything else you'd like to ask our guests?
Nothing jumps to mind, I must admit.
David and Lynn, any final statements you'd like to post before we wrap up?
I think I'd like to just put a plug in for CF10. Supporters Trust. It costs you £1 for life to be a shareholder of CF10. We're not in a sense, a traditional supporters club. We don't run buses and things like that, but we do try to make a lot of noise at the places where we can. So at Cardiff Rugby and with the WRU. So please, we're always looking for people to come and join us and tell us what they think as well. So please do get involved. If you're already a member, 8th of October, we'll have our open board meeting, just a chance for people to feel that they're welcome. I mean, any member's always welcome to come along, but just come and give us some feedback and ask us some questions or tell us some things. We always love to hear from people.
Absolutely, David.
Well, just thanks for having us on again. It's been good fun, good to chat. Yeah, I mean, if people want to get stuff to me, they can do it through CF10, but also have an email address through Cardiff Rugby that people can reach me through. So I'm happy to receive direct stuff from fans. So you don't feel obliged. You have to go through any of the groups really. But yeah, no, thanks for having us on, and we'll see you again in the future, I hope.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you so much, guys. And I should say that I hope your viewer listenership is increasing, because so many people are saying so many positive things, and the fact that you're getting people like Matt Sharrett and Richard Holland and even Mike, the communications officer from behind the scenes, that is all good stuff. So thank you for doing that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for putting a link to us on the latest CF10 newsletter as well. That was
very welcome,
very helpful. Yes, thank you for taking your time out this evening. It's been a pleasure. All that's left is, I think, as well done, is say thank you once again, Lynn, David, and Carwyn, and we will be back next week where we are going to preview the Zebra game. So that's all from us. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cardiff Central podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to us, as it really helps spread the word. You can find us on all the usual social media channels or email us on welshregionalrugbypod@gmail.com. And remember, whatever the question is, rugby is always the answer.